Welcome to Hanging Out with Robert, that's me. This video contains things that I tinker with throughout the day. For step-by-step detailed instructions of those tasks, you can click on the links in the comment section below. I plan on leaving this video accessible for about 30 days. After that, you can view it through my Patreon account. This video also has tips and tricks that I've learned over the years. So, thank you very much for watching. Day 3, time to get cracking. First thing I need to do is get the turbo drain line on. I stopped on that yesterday. I was having a hard time, wasn't lining up. Somebody bent a dang coolant line back there. I had to bend it back. Hopefully I didn't crack that. So let me get some gloves on, get this drain line hooked up and going, and go from there. Next thing you want to do is pull all your turbo charge piping. On this car, the turbo's there. Your first little connection is that little hose there. The pipe comes over, which is metal on this vehicle. Then you have a hose here. Then it goes into the intercooler down through that next metal hose. So there's a rubber hose down here. Then it comes out of the intercooler up here through this hose here. Then it goes into the intake manifold through this hose here. I highly recommend that you pull all these and physically check them. You really can't check them with them installed in the car. You want to check, make sure that 1, they're not soft, 2, they don't have any tears or anything. Sometimes they look fine from up top, but underneath you may find tears and cuts. Also, if they're soft, you might get swelling when you pressurize the turbo system. So if you're talking about doing any performance upgrade, increasing the boost pressure of the system, you'll just destroy any old worn out hoses. As you can see, this hose here is literally saturated with oil. That hose definitely needs to be replaced. The one at the bottom of the intercooler needs to be replaced. This one up here has already been replaced. It's in good shape. This one here is getting close to being needed and replaced. It's soft down the bottom of it. See my hand there? It's getting oil saturated as well. This turbo was pushing oil through this piping, and oil going through these rubber hoses makes them wear faster and deteriorate. So you could either get the original style hoses and replace them, or you could replace them with a performance type system. These particular cars has an option called a RIP kit, reverse intercooler piping. I got a link in the comments about that. But that's part of tuning up your turbo, is to make sure that this stuff is in good shape. You don't have to do it every year. Do it every 100,000, every 50,000 after that. First 100, just check all these hoses, make sure they're not at the point of failure. Again, you want to check the turbo while it's installed in the car. You don't have to pull anything off other than the inlet, and you want to go in here, make sure this doesn't have any wiggle plate, which this one has plenty. You could actually make the blades scrape the sidewalls of the turbo and make sure it doesn't have any in and out play, which this one has plenty. If you look, it has a little bit of in and out play. Oh. Again, it was pushing oil up out of here. If you look down in there, you'll see some oil. It rained a little water in there. It's just blowing a lot of oil saturated air, which of course collects on those rubber tubes and deteriorates them. Now if you want, you can pull off the exhaust, and down in there should be nice and grayish. They want to be nice and grayish. If they're black, they're losing oil. This one, the oil seal on the back of it is fine. Another thing on the turbo you want to check, or if it's 20 years old, just go ahead and replace it. It's got to be worn out. Is the bypass diaphragm. I think I spoke about this earlier. This allows the turbo to relieve pressure when you pull your foot off of the gas and that throttle closes. And a lot of times these will develop a small hole in the rubber diaphragm. If these are leaking and you don't know it, you may not be able to build and hold the boost that you normally would hold with the system. This one here actually looks like it's okay. This turbo was rebuilt in the past, but sometimes you could hold them up to the light and actually see a torn hole in them. And this is the turbo bypass diaphragm or valve. Spring loaded, so it'll relieve pressure at a certain PSI. So maybe it'll relieve, this one is stock, it may relieve pressure at 18. So you're cruising along, boosting 8, 9, 10 PSI, you let your foot off the gas, the turbo's still turning, it's going to be building pressure for another second or two. That pressure exceeds what this is capable of holding. This will open up and bleed off that extra pressure so that it don't over pressurize the turbo system and over pressurize the tubing and tear up and destroy your tubing. I had one of these go bad on my vehicle and I didn't know it, but my boost went from 10 down to about 2 PSI. And it was kind of like the frog in the pan. The boost, as the hole got bigger, the boost finally was producing less and less. And before I knew it, I was driving around with kind of like a normal car. That turbo wasn't kicking in nice and strong, and I just had normal acceleration. And when I realized my pressure was low, I started digging around and found this thing torn. Another thing you want to do is test the wastegate actuator. It's down there on the turbo, that cylinder with the rod coming out. It has a vacuum line on it. We call them vacuum line. That one's actually a pressure line. Let me show you on the other turbo. So here's that wastegate actuator. It's responsible for receiving pressure, and the diaphragm expands this arm, opens up this wastegate to bleed pressure off of the turbo system. This wastegate is kind of jammed up in this turbo. That's not good. It should be nice and easy, but it's kind of hard to function. Anyway, when this computer senses that there's enough turbo pressure and it's getting a little bit more turbo pressure than necessary, it will pressurize this diaphragm, extend this arm, and open up that wastegate down inside that turbo there. That door opens up, bypasses exhaust gases, slows down the speed of the turbo. Now what you want to do is disconnect the arm from the wastegate. Put a pressure tube on here that can pressurize up to about 5 PSI is all that's necessary. Most of these are programmed to hold and start opening at 2 PSI. Well, let me back up. Find one that can pressurize up to 20 PSI. Plug in the pressure hose on there, pump up the pressure tool, extend this to 2 PSI, make sure it holds 2 PSI for a couple of minutes, extend it to 5 PSI, make sure it holds 5 PSI for a couple of minutes, extend it to 10 PSI, make sure it holds 10 PSI for a couple of minutes. If it holds those different PSIs and it's extending this arm out as you increase the pressure, that thing is likely good. So check it at 2 PSI, check it at 5 PSI, check it at 10 PSI, and you'll know that that is serviceable. It's good. You don't need to replace it. Everything's back together. We have the coolant in, the oil changed. I have the ignition coil disconnected, fuel pump relay out. I'm going to crank the engine until my low oil pressure light goes out. That'll protect that brand new turbo. All right, let's get cranking. Watch this oil pressure. Oil pressure right there. When that goes out, we should be ready to start. You don't want to run the starter longer than 15 seconds, really, if you don't have to. Run it a few seconds, let it rest 15 seconds, run it 15 seconds. Ready for round 2. There it go. Oil pressure light went out. We're ready to start it up. Let me hook everything back up. I am trying to repair these servo motors that control the climate control blend doors. I was told that these are servo motors and they communicate back to the control module, and when they fail to communicate back to the control module, they just go in one position and stay there. Even though they work, they're not working properly. So I pulled these 3 screws out, pried the case open. Little tabs don't really matter. I'm using a penknife to separate that, but I'm going to take this out first. That may have something to do with it, those little fingers on those things. Those brush across that, so maybe that's what I need to clean with contact lubrication and put back together. But I'm going to dive a little deeper, see what's going on under there. I pried this board up. It comes up with the motor. However, you really should get under it and push the pins out, because the pins is what's really holding this part down. So here's other gears and stuff down here. Doesn't seem to matter per se. None of those are broken. They all seem to work. So I don't know if you need to go under there. But what I'm going to do is clean this contact area up real good and hope that fixes it, and maybe this corner that I chipped and broke trying to pry it up is not going to matter. So I'm going to clean this off with contact cleaner, clean those pins off with contact cleaner, put some kind of lubricant maybe back on it, and put it back together and see if it works properly. Took some electrical contact cleaner, sprayed it on there 4 or 5 seconds, did the same to the brushes right there. So I'm going to put this back together, plug it in, see if it works. When you're putting this back together, use these pins, guide it through the casing, and then when you start to lower the motor part down, wiggle your gear here till your motor falls in place. Don't just force it down. Now that that's down, I'm going to put the wipers over here and try to get that lined up so that this falls in the way it's supposed to. I don't know if that, it looks like it'll go down anywhere in there. And now I'm going to put the casing back on, put the screws in it, take it outside, test it. This side of the servo motor has a block that goes down into a channel. Lower that down nice and easy. Get that through there. Clip the edges around. Put the screws back in it. We're going to try to fix this ECC system with replacing it with one from the vehicle in the junkyard. That's the part number on that one. That's the part number on that one. Seem to have, I think, different part numbers. I don't know if that's the part number or not. Let me swap the units, see what happens. If you feel that this information was useful, please like it and share it with your social media friends. You can subscribe to my channel so that you will get notifications of future videos that I post. You can follow me on Twitter, and if you need to contact me directly, please visit my website. And if you have any questions, leave them below, and someone or myself will reply to them. Again, thank you very much for watching.